Welcome to Transform, Tomorrow's Thinking Today. Real conversations on the innovation shaping businesses and our society.
Hello, welcome back to Transform. So, infrastructure asset owners around the world are facing the same fundamental tension. There's enormous pressure from governments, communities, economies. We all want to build new roads, new pipes, new networks. Everyone loves the new. And the logic is compelling. Is why do governments do it? Where basically more capacity means more productivity. And we're looking at how do we get freight to move faster across our networks? How do we unlock land for housing? And it's all about an economic growth. But I guess the problem that sometimes doesn't get enough airtime is we already have about 90% of the assets that we'll own for the next 100 years. So how do we keep them in a good state of repair? And it isn't just a maintenance question, it is a strategic one as well. Because if we allow them to fall into a state of disrepair, we're undermining the very outcomes that all the new investment is supposed to support. So the industry has known this for a while. There's been a massive focus on trying to create digital asset data. And there's been a significant push towards standardization of that. ISO 19650's come around in terms of helping us understand how we manage information. And everyone's looking towards creating better records of their asset data, holding more information. Well, that's great. But what's evolved from that is it's a big problem of fragmentation because the people doing it are sort of spread across the industry. So it might be consultants or contractors, but the asset owner tends to just get what comes over the fence to them. So there's a real lack of centralization and standardization of that information. But it means that they're drowning in the data, but they still don't actually have the information they need to make the right decisions and to prioritize spend in the right way and to really understand the state of their asset. So today's conversation is about that gap and what closing it really takes. We're going to look at what Tauranga City Council and GHD have learned doing this type of work together. But we also want to just take a look out to the horizon as well. What does the future look like for asset owners across APAC, across the globe, when we actually get this? First of all, I want to welcome our two panelists. Welcome to Juan Martinez from Tauranga City Council.
Thank you, Theresa. Nice being here.
And welcome to Asem Zabin from GHD.
Good to see you both.
Juan, I want to start with you. You sit in the council, in one of our councils in New Zealand, and you've got really a front view of what's changing for asset owners across New Zealand and probably across APAC as well. What's going to drive in the fundamental changes?
Yes, thank you, Theresa. I think one of the most fundamental changes is the expectation on local government. Local governments today are expected to do more, produce more complexities, more scrutiny, more questions. But at the same time, they expected to do that with the same or fewer resources. On the other side, we also got an issue that is aging infrastructure across the sector. The growth, pressure, people, population, related risk, compliance requirements, community expectation, level of service. What we can say is that there is actually what is driving the changes is the need to make faster, better decisions with better information. And that is really pushing councils or local government to modernize not just technology, but the capabilities behind how they manage information, assets, operations. It's not just about technology, but it's the capabilities that sit in behind those processes.
Now, we see a lot of that pressure coming from central government as well. Chris Bishop, who's Minister for Infrastructure, is spending a lot of time these days talking about what his expectations are around how we manage our assets more effectively. But I think you sort of touched on a point there that I sort of spin to you, Asem, and it's the capabilities that the organisations have, and we can't just magic those out of thin air. So, Asem, in your opinion, what capability gaps did you see that asset owners are struggling with the most as this change accelerates?
Yeah, look, it's probably got more challenging in the recent years with the AI exponential transformation that's happened over the last few years. What has happened for the asset owners is we've been building over the last decades or forever, right? Previously, we lacked information, and what's been happening recently is because of that, there was a big push to get more information about your assets. And so we are getting a lot of really good information. We're getting a lot of data. While this sounds really amazing, the problem now with the asset owners are facing is that it's actually the other way around. Everyone thinks they have data. No one has data. You actually don't have access to the right information. So that is probably problem number one, and the research shows there's a really good amount of time spent on finding the right information, and that does take time from you as a professional. That takes time from your business processes. So 20 to 30% of your time is spent on finding the right information. That's really a lot of time of you wasted on looking for the right information. So that's one thing that is asset owners are struggling with. And then the second one I would say is managing knowledge. This whole revolution we're going through with the digital revolution or the AI revolution, we're moving away from intuition and experience. So the way we used to know things, again, as asset owners, whether it's rail or water or whatever we were looking at, the knowledge was always in the intuition and institutional knowledge. And now it's kind of getting democratized. That is a big change for the industry as well. And really building on what Juan was saying, there is always budget constraints. So how do you do more for less while you still need a lot of the capability built behind you? So there is that. And then how do you engage with the supply chain? So depending on the organization, you are used to getting a lot of your delivery from the supply chain.
I agree with you 100%, Asem. And when you were talking about data, in the concept that everyone has, but everyone doesn't have data, the true value for the organizations come when operations can start making decisions. They got insights from the data. That's when it becomes valuable. That's when you're translating value for money, doing more with less. But I guess the key there, when we talk about capacity and capabilities and all of that stuff, building that structure, it takes a lot of discipline and governance. Yes. And without those layers, you can build something, but you're not making it sustainable for the longevity.
I think some of the areas you touched on, that capability gap, seem to be that the industry's all moving at different speeds as well. You describe, some people capturing lots of data, organizations collecting lots of data, but not really having the information they need because they're maybe not moving at the same speed in terms of understanding how they capitalize on the information they're collecting. And then looking after it as an asset, you kind of touched on as well, not maybe realizing that that's something that, just like a physical asset, actually does need to be maintained as well. Often within organizations, you don't quite have those roles and responsibilities set out. So perhaps it's not a lack of governance or an understanding of how you should actually treat this particular asset, which is your asset data. So we wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about what happened at Tauranga City Council and what really made you as infrastructure owners take a step change into realising that you needed to build your own capability. Before we sort of talk about the actual work, we probably should give you a little bit of context of where Tauranga is in the world, what a city council does here in New Zealand. So I'm going to pass over to you, Juan, just to talk about that first.
Yeah, thank you, Theresa. Yeah, Tauranga City Council sits in the east coast of the North Island within New Zealand. Tauranga City is at the moment, is hosting around 160,000 people population-wise, to give you a bit of the size of the population. And it's growing in the last 10 years. The City Council looks after different assets or critical infrastructure within the city. And we could divide them in three areas. One is transport, roading, the other one is water, and the other one is buildings. I myself, I sit within the water pillar, that leg, and so most of the work is being done within that water activity. And I guess I'll give a bit of context around when we started this work. The main challenge at the time for us was sitting across different systems, different teams, different formats. And it was really hard from an operational point of view to get a trusted view for maintenance, for operations, for planning of those assets. As a consequence of those silos, it creates quite a bit of friction when it comes to decision making. It makes it difficult, takes more time. People spend much longer trying to find information, checking, reworking information, instead of using the data, the information that is available in those assets with confidence. I can trust this. I guess everything comes to, can I trust this data to make an operational decision? So for us, from a water perspective, the aim was to build a strong foundation So information could be more reliable, it could be more connected and more useful, not just at a project level, but on the asset life cycle.
You just described the same problem that probably every infrastructure asset owner has in New Zealand and maybe around the world. What was there anything that sort of just tipped you over the edge? Like,
I guess it comes down to the ownership, how much you want it, how much you want to change it. That's what it comes down to. And once again, I believe that the operational side of you looking after your asset, the asset management side, is something that usually gets overlooked, and the project delivery gets more time on the radio rather than the operation side of the asset. And when you think about the asset life cycle, you might spend 1 year, 5 years building an asset, but you're going to spend 20, 50 years maintaining that asset, operating the asset. And so realizing the value, it comes to many different things. And that's more of an organization and having the right leadership in place.
we've always been impressed that you did, obviously, and we have seen others sort of follow in your footsteps, which has been great. I mean, I think, Tauranga has been well recognised as a leader in this space, particularly for councils in New Zealand. Let's kind of get to the good stuff. Like, there was a vision, we know some of the challenges and problems, and you actually went on a journey to do this. Asem, you were working right alongside Juan and the teams over there. In your opinion, first of all, and then we can pass it to you as well, Juan, what does the work enable now that just wasn't even possible before?
Well, I think what Tauranga City Council did is they really took a step back and focused on the foundation, trying to build that data foundation, right? Trying to build data literacy in the council, try to build a better understanding of the importance of asset information and getting it right from the capital phase. And that's really key. What it enables is there is a change of roles internally. So rather than us spending time on finding information as the asset information team or the asset managers, the role has become into becoming more of a custodian of the asset information. And also it means that we can report better for the community, because at the end of the day, this is what the council's job is. So do you want to report really well on the community? You can predict things before they actually happen, because as Juan said in the beginning of this episode, you want data-driven decisions. So you want to know, when are you going to replace this pipe before it's too late? Or when this system is going to fail before it's too late? And you can do this with really good asset data. So that's really what enables. Everybody wants to do AI, and we love AI, and we want to do more of that to an extent. But at the same time, you want to get your foundation right. So this is really what it enables. So before you go to the shiny stuff, it will enable a lot of, basically you're building the really good foundation. And then once you get the right foundation, you can build whatever you want on top of it. I'll pass it to you, Juan, if you want to add anything there.
Pretty comprehensive, Asem. But yeah, it basically set the foundation for a more connected and usable view of how we deal with information. Instead of relying from data points in time or manual interpretation, we got now a stronger foundation for consistency, traceability, cross-team collaboration, visibility. If you look at that turns into operational awareness. And that is the key, that the organization, from project delivery, from planning, from asset management, brings the operational awareness, the real value, the real cost of maintaining that asset. Then we start better aligning between delivery and operations.
I think you just described the dream.
Exactly right. So if we can just, and I'm talking about foundations in here, right? That we're setting the foundation for those things. And I guess if you look forward, the idea is by bringing that operational awareness to the delivery, and you can align them, then you build a stronger confidence in decisions that need to be made from day zero, procurement.
It's a really good point. And it kind of goes back to your first, when you were talking about having lots of data, but not able to do as much as you would like with it. I think that the understanding that the data you have is data you can use, that it's accurate, it's complete, it's current, is as important as having as much information as possible at your fingertips. I've definitely heard other councils describe, and other asset owners just describe that we've got lots of information, but we don't really know if it's accurate. I think having that kind of discipline around the passover of information as much as we do around our physical assets is it's going to be gold.
I was talking to someone yesterday here in Sydney about this. The other indirect answer to your question, Theresa, is if we look at what Tauranga City Council is doing at the moment, they have pretty much like a digital twin. They are scanning almost every single asset that they have in the water space, at least. There is a lot of things that's happening there, and that is an indirect result. That was not obviously the plan when you start this project, but once you've improved the capability and once you do that capability uplift, then the maturity rises in the council, and so more innovation comes to play. So this is the kind of things you want to see for your community, because what they're trying to do is more predictive things. So the stuff that Juan is doing with the operational digital twin is exactly that. So that's one of the things that I really love watching, is the indirect result of that is now you've got more mature, more progressive people who want to do more for the community.
Yeah, I love that, because it actually says, well, you've almost moved the dial on the expectations that people have around what they can do with a digital asset now. And Juan, you're rising to the challenge of that by having the models themselves there as well. And I know talking to other councils, and like we touched a bit on obviously what's changed and how it's changed, and really sort of it driving these expectations. But we know that it wasn't easy, right? We didn't start in last month and we're here, ta-da, already. It was, from what I remember, October 2021 that we kind of started this journey. It's been a long journey of change, and lots of challenges along the way in terms of explaining it to people and making them be able to understand why it would make a difference to them. Why did they have to change, rather than expect that perhaps a consultant or contractor will just do things differently and we'll get the same magical outcome. It might be just worth touching on what needed to change internally, and that's just right across, people and processes that you have and governance, not just technology. What needed to happen to make this successful?
Yeah, that's the key. Make it sustainable, that it can stay over time. And I guess exactly right. It's not about technology. Definitely not. That should be the last thing. So the technology, the tool itself, is not going to make it stick. Not going to make it stay around for too long. I think it's more about the combination of clear ownership and the better defined processes, governance that give the continuity. It provides the work with the continuity that it needs. Without the clear ownership, the defined process and governance, it becomes really difficult for the longevity of it. And I guess internally for us, the shift or the change, it started when people start seeing the information as an operational asset, not just as an output of a project. I think if people need to take something away from this chat is the need to bring those things closer. Why? Because then there can be accountability around data quality, decision use from a project delivery, from a genesis of a planning initiative. Then the capability to sustain all of these things, they become sustainable on their own. Then they becomes the norm rather than experimental, rather than a proof of concept, rather than a pocket here and there. It's really hard without the right governance and ownership to make it sustainable, because otherwise you start developing all of these different camps here and there that when you try to join them together, you're going to struggle big time. And for us, there was a lot of change management, developing those things that we do now together, bring them, ask them, what does it need to change? How makes your life, your day-to-day easier, better, more productive? But bring them along the journey, develop it together. Collaboration.
Yeah, I think everyone's got to see themselves in the success of the initiative before they're going to put the hard yards in. Hey, so just we take this work to others in terms of trying to help them leverage what Tauranga and others in this space are doing. Is there sort of anything you would be saying?
Well, I think, as Juan said, and Theresa, you know this very well, we've done this before and we tried different ways and we spoke to different clients, and what we see is clients and consultants bake this really beautiful slide decks that tells you a really good story of where we're starting and where we're going to end up. And oftentimes it just stays where it was delivered. What Tauranga City Council did, and Juan already touched on this, is having the right vision, but also what they did is did the bottom-up approach, which is find the projects. So you really want to run them both together. You want to have your vision, your plan, your roadmap, but at the same time, you are showing some quick wins. You started somewhere. Just do the mahi, as what we say in Tereo, which means do the work, really. So that's kind of why if you want to start this with another organization, really is, I would say, do kind of both of them at the same time. You wanna have a plan because that's what your leadership team want to see. They want to trust you on this, but at the same time, the leadership team want to see results. So before they lose hope in it, you want to show them some outcomes, really, basically.
100%. Yeah, I think that's really good advice for anyone in terms of how you get started. And Juan, you often say, just get started.
just crack into it, 100%.
Yeah.
And that is exactly right. You need to get some wins, quick wins that you can show and gain the trust. Once again, that the trust that the leadership team, the sponsorship team, the executive team will say, hey, yep, we can back that up and we can become a BAU eventually. But you need to do both, that bottom up and that strategic thinking at the same time.
Yeah, thanks team. That's really good perspective. What do you need to do to really make it stick? I now wanted to look a little bit into the future. So get your kind of crystal balls out and do your best. When we're talking about asset owners across APAC and what their future looks like, what is your take on what does it look like into the future? What are we dealing with? It's uncertain, so no one's going to come back in 2 years and say you were wrong. What can you see kind of already on the horizon, and how do you think the work you've done is going to help us respond to that?
I think what we're building here is decision resilience, the ability to respond with confidence when those conditions change. That no one knows what's going to happen in the future. So building decision resilience is I think that's what we're doing, and that's what we can take away. We are also improving visibility, consistency. We are providing confidence in the underlying information, the information that we use to make decisions. And when things change, when the environment becomes a bit of uncertain, I believe that as any asset owner, especially on critical infrastructure, we need to be able to assess options quickly, understand. And I guess if we can have stronger information capabilities, that will give us better platforms for resilience. Then we are becoming less dependent on fragmented, siloed knowledge, information, manual workarounds, teams that are working in separate areas. We start getting more that cross-pollination. So decision resilience, I think, is the key one.
Love that. That's such a good expression. And I think when we live in New Zealand, where we've got many natural disaster type events, it's a constant kind of responsiveness to changing environments and changing state of assets as well.
Going back to that point before, Asem, that you were making about the AI and technology itself, there is an expectation that organizations today make that decision quicker, that they pivot quicker, they take action quicker, especially with natural disasters. Here in Tauranga, we are exposed to tsunamis, earthquakes, it's flooding. It comes with risk, so we got to be prepared. We got to be resilient. This as a society, as a community, as a country.
Now that you've moved to Australia, Asem, is there a perspective you would bring in terms of asset owners over there? I love Juan's expression, and I would expect that has a global resonance. But is there anything more specific you're already picking up on from
100%,
Australia?
100%. I was at a water conference, and speaking of resilience, actually, one of the takeaways is that water systems that are resilient, but if they are not affordable, they're not going to survive politically or financially for the next generations. So if we think about the future, affordability is very important. It requires a holistic thinking about engineering, economics, social outcomes, environmental sustainability, like all together, not in silos. And then the other thing that comes to my mind is scale and capability. Same as New Zealand, in Australia, they're small fragmented providers simply could not build specialized expertise the modern water system requires, whether it's climate adaptation, digital systems, regulatory systems. Collaboration and partnerships will be absolutely key for us to keep going into the future. That is definitely something that comes to my mind. And then again, we kind of started by talking about this, but it does really come back to using what we have today in terms of relying on really good information rather than the intuition that we have or the knowledge or the experience that we have. It's just not going to get us to the next 100 years, really. The driven optimization is kind of almost here, really. So how do we use data really to do more with less?
You touched on so many good points there. Our infrastructure assets don't end at council boundaries. They don't end with a particular asset type. They're all so interconnected. And I think the point on collaboration, but also that standardization and what it actually means for the ability to make holistic decisions across all the facets that you mentioned there, that's what's going to drive it. That's probably, as you described, what's actually needed for the future as well. And one of the points you touched on was not having the scale, particularly in New Zealand, a long, skinny country with people all over the country, and Auckland being the biggest is still only 1.6 million, which is probably tiny in comparison to most cities around the world. But it brings its own challenges because your rate-based payers are spread out across quite a distance. And obviously that brings an economic challenge on keeping resilient assets. One of the things we're looking at is consolidation of water entities and into bigger, larger entities to try and give it a bit more scale and a bit more understanding of how you manage that precious resource across a larger geographic spread with a larger ratepayer base to help sustain the right infrastructure for the future. So I think 100% agree with all your points. Asem, you touched on a lot around the way that we need to think for the future. In order to do that, what capabilities are going to matter most? What do we need to develop within our people and our processes that will actually help support that type of future paradigm?
If you asked this question probably 5-10 years ago, there are a lot of people will tell you data science and programming will absolutely be key. And it's funny because if you ask this question today, it's changing. I think it's what capability is needed is having that kind of holistic understanding of what is required, thinking really strategically about the business, really understanding what the needs are and what the community needs. Because I will re-stress again on what I just said before about the affordability. Really, we can build the most amazing stuff, but if they're not affordable, then we're not really serving anybody here. And again, when you speak about Asia Pacific, there is a lot of privatization at the moment happening, and it's just not public, all as we're used to it. So, get business understanding, critical thinking, I would say, is absolutely one of the most important capabilities.
Yeah, I guess you're looking at the future. I think the strongest asset owners or local government councils in this case for us won't be the ones that have better systems or better technology, but I think that they're going to be the ones that they got better organizational knowledge, organizational memory, because that will provide better decision support and also better alignment between strategy, delivery, and operations, governance, integration between teams, and strong internal capabilities.
Yeah. So I'm going to pull us back a tiny bit. Just if we were to all reconvene in 2 years' time, what do you really hope that we're talking about?
I think in a couple of years, I hope that we're no longer talking about all of these as a separate initiative, digital engineering, information management. I hope that the organizations as owners, they naturally sort of get into it and becomes the new norm. This is how we work. This is how we do it. That success, I think it would mean the better information is simply embedded into operations, planning, governance, and the conversation that we're having is shifted from fixing foundations to realizing broader value, resilience, long-term services improvement, better decisions, making use of operational insights from the structured data foundation that we created. I hope that the chats, the conversations mutate into us results rather than still trying to fix the foundation.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah, I agree with you, Juan. How we're using data and insights to get more understanding. We're using AI agents to get more value from it than what we are getting it now. It will be really interesting to listen to this in 2 years' time. I hope we're not talking about the same digital engineering or information management the way we are doing it today. I mean, that will still probably be there in some way or shape or form, but I hope it's not the same, and trying to convince people that this is the thing that you need to do.
I think we would all agree with that. There's a little part of me that worries we will, because what we've learned so far is this takes time and people do need to be patient. It is not unicorns and rainbows and a magic wand and everything will change tomorrow. So people keep doing the work, keep investing in it, and hopefully we're talking about more of what was made possible by the investment and the change. Thanks very much for your time, both of you. Really appreciate you joining us on Transform, our GHD series, and we'll wrap us up there.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Theresa. Thanks, Juan.
You've been listening to Transform by GHD. Big ideas, real impact.